Sources of the ethnogenesis and their mutual relation. A science named ethnogenesis studied the ethnic roots for any people by examining the initial stage of the ethnic history. As an historical science, the ethnogenesis should be based on a complex study of every possible primary source. Conclusions of the study of one primary source should match the conclusion received from the analysis of about sources. Only a synthesis of the conclusions for all primary sources can give adequate data about ethnogenesis. To such a complex approach should also be applied the evidence of related disciplines. Unfortunately, there are ethnogenical studies based only on a small part of available primary sources. This, first of all, applies to the ethnogenesis of Turks. Therefore, it will list here the main sources of the ethnogenesis and to remind the reader of the necessity of their concordance. The first and reliable ethnogenical primary sources are linguistic materials. Language is a basic means of organization of a social life. Therefore, it can give some evidence about the most ancient period for a tribe or a people, though eventually any language changes with development, but the comparative historical method in linguistics can establish the most ancient forms of phonetical, morphological, syntax, and lexical systems. In the ethnogenesis of the Turkic peoples, the evidence of comparative historical linguistics of the Turkic languages presently are performed absolutely insufficiently. The objective is that in the Turkological ethnogenetical research, the scientists employ use the linguistical materials. One more reliable source of the ethnogenesis is the evidence of anthropological research, especially craniological, that studies skull features of ancient and modern peoples. The craniological observations were used in ethnogenetical research relatively late, and in Turkology the results of the research quite often contradict the traditional views of the ethnogenesis of the Turks. Therefore, in Turkic ethnic history, the craniology is not in favor too much. Take the data from the ethnogenesis of Bulgaria-Tatar people. The established opinion was that the ancestors of the Bulgaria-Tatars came to the central Volga region in the 7th century AD. But Trofimova's chronological research carried out back in 30s resulted in her conclusion that the modern Tatar population developed from the ancient strata of the local population, which was absorbed some later anthropological theories. Trofimova, 1948-61. Other researchers also agree with this conclusion, but there is felt depend to also justify traditional views of the scientists about non-aboriginality of the Bulgaria-Tatars in the Ural-Ital region. Akimova, 1954. More general craniological research that study materials of other regions of the Eastern Europe also show that Turks have here deep anthropological roots, that they were not disposed to constant movement as the traditional historical science described them. Gerasimova, M.M., Rudanem, Yablonsky, L.T., 1987.